I did not know that I was coming to the mic tonight, and I am celebrating a sudden moment of clarity and energetic resource to speak. Um, I will be offering a back to my usual bullshit Mercury and Pisces retrograde native style. Um, and by bullshit, I mean lovingly, like my lyrical, wordy way of talking, but I'm going to be going on a ride and I'm taking you with me. So I just want to be upfront about where I'm intending to go with this for those of you that are down for this winding transmission and just update and reflection about what's happening astrologically. So, what I will be talking about is the Mars retrograde in Leo and how it is approaching in opposition to Pluto and Aquarius. It's actually been in orb of this opposition for weeks because of the retrograde. And weeks ago, I sent a letter about it to my mailing list. And it took me a while, like a big delay to transmit it and get here on video because I've been going through a lot emotionally, physically, energetically, and I just didn't have it in me. I've been going through some really deep processes related to what I've been forecasted about of de-thawing freeze. So as I began to get deeper into like learning new healing modalities and opening some things up, um, things were happening, things were coming up. I was working with some really deep internal threads, some emergence. And so what I noticed that I think might be universal about it and why I'm going to bother sharing was that one of the things that I was tracking was like just being at my end, like exhausted, burned the fuck out, right? And like not in a way that necessarily has to do with my work. Um, it was more like an overall nervous system thing. It was more like an overall posture of the places that I was being inauthentic, the places that I was in fear, the places that I was bracing, and the amount of energy that it takes to maintain those postures, the vigilance and whatnot. And I didn't know this at first. I just knew that I was tired. And I could see, but couldn't, crawl to the mic and like tell you all this because I was too tired. But what I was tracking and feeling was like, it's Capricorn season, which is a major time around, it is the darkest time on the Northern Hemisphere. It's winter. The days have gotten short. There's something about, energetic reserves and understanding our capacity. And I think that when we have less energy, right? Like when you have a lot of energy, you can spill and you can waste. But when things get tighter, you see where there's some leaks in your system, right? So for me, it was very energetic. Like, what are these patterns? What am I holding on to? Um, but then it was also Mars retrograde. And I go from loving my fitness routine, being super into it, to still doing it, but feeling like I'm dragging. Why is this so hard suddenly? Why is everything so hard? Like, um, and knowing, well, of course, Mars is retrograde. Like, I knew that as a transit might affect my, like going to the gym and whatnot. So then there's Mars retrograde, Capricorn season, and also a dark moon in Capricorn leading to a new moon in Capricorn. So I think there's been a number of things happening all at once to really slow us way, way down. And as deeply uncomfortable and unpleasant as that feels, and I can empathize from experience, and I know some other people are experiencing something similar, right? Or like you may be taking really good care of yourself. You may have this support or type of lifestyle where you can really recuperate. And whatever level it's playing at, it's like things were getting, I think, a little bit uh, stretched with this current astrology. Not to mention Mars Pluto in freeze frame for a longer period of time. But that transit, I titled it originally to my mailing list, Mars retrograde and Pluto, the freedom to play. And I'm happy to say that all this inner thing I've been going through, all this inner work around dealing with my exhaustion and my survival responses and all the stuff that was coming up, as I was able to de-thaw that material, and this, Pluto and Aquarius, deep freeze, Mars and Leo, it's like activating, and there's something about play and expression. And so I was feeling into the parts of me that were feeling rigid, robotic, like not expressive, not authentic, and being like, I just want to be like free. I want to be expressive. I want to feel um, like something within me that I'm connected to, I'm emanating out. So I waited a while, I guess, to get here and talk about it because I was caught up, if you will. But let me show you the transit on here. This is when it will be exact, January 3rd. We have a retrograde Mars that started its retrograde. I think if we go back, actually, December 7th, 6 degrees of Leo, still in that opposition, right? So it's been almost a month that we've had Mars opposite Pluto. Like that is crunk. That's crazy. Like that is a lot of time to be in Mars-Pluto land. Like why I say that is just like it is such an energized, intensified martial experience, and Mars is retrograde. So yeah, I don't mean to get too high on my supply in terms of dramatizing like how intense it is that this transit has been in freeze frame. And let me maybe just get back to my script so I can calm down and tell you what this has been about and what you may have been experiencing and what there's still space to develop as this Mars retrograde story continues. So this Mars story has been foreshadowing and hinting and brewing since Mars entered pre-shadow on October 5th. So it's been a while of 2024. Mars will station direct again in late February in mid-Cancer, and it's going to exit post-retrograde shadow on May 2nd, 2025. Mars retrogrades are a deeper time of recalibrating our will, as well as recalibrating how we navigate conflict. Sometimes the dramas that present themselves to us during Mars retrogrades have a way of pinning us to a spot within ourselves that we are not used to confronting, right? So it's a unique or novel conflict, whether it's a relationship conflict or even as I was describing this experience I was having with burnout or exhaustion and how it was pointing me to a part of myself that only exhaustion would show me, because having enough energy would allow me to keep overriding that very spot. So this is what I notice about Mars retrogrades is they do confront us, or kind of like you feel maybe pinned down to a spot because of it. So this amplifies the emotional intensity and the drama of the transit, yes, but it's also giving us an experience of initiation. It's how we choose to respond to a novel pressure point that could very well call us into a new evolution of ourselves. I want to add too, by the way, that like this whole experience that I had with like what Mars retrograde was showing me, it was so relational. Like I've been working with new practitioners. I've felt like I've been encountering like genius Aquarius people, and I've also felt empathized with Leo at a new level of depth. And I've been learning how to empathize with things inside of myself that I was in freeze about, which is, I think, very relevant to this transit and maybe something that's more universal and other people are experiencing or might experience too. So I want to offer some perspective on Mars and Leo itself and what it means that we're in this Mars-Pluto hovering time. We have been the last month. My notes say this write-up may turn into a video version as well in the near future, but I'm sending it as a text-only missive for now while it's hot and Mars just stationed. Took me a damn month. Anyway, on November 19th, Pluto re-entered Aquarius for the first time for Pluto re-entered Aquarius for the final time for the next 20 years. So we have major innovations in technology as a theme. We can talk about that at a material, mundane, or collective level, but we can also consider inner technologies and their acceleration. Inner technologies like the healing arts, which I've been geeking out about and meeting brilliant, genius people, telepathy and psychic ability, lucid dreaming ability, intuition, soul retrieval skills, and so on. Like Aquarian technology, think about it at a spiritual level too. That's, I think, really exciting. Yes, there's also like the robots or whatnot, like literally the new robots that are like doing chores for people. I haven't researched it enough to talk about it, but like think about also just like consciousness technologies. Other Pluto and Aquarius themes, freedom. There's a strong liberation impulse with Pluto and Aquarius, but also the initiatory processes of moving through the obstacles to that freedom. I want to highlight again the internal level of this, such as in the form of healing trauma-based patterns in our nervous system that keep us stuck, looping, or not free, or opening up resilience or capacity in our nervous systems that make us able and free to have different experiences than we used to not be able to hold before. An image and a metaphor that I use all the time is like that kind of classic image of like a museum security system with like the red laser beams, and how like the thief inside of the museum has to like limbo and acrobat like through the red laser beams, and how those red laser beams are like your triggers, right? Like how instead of information or energy or experience just moving freely through our system, it's like there's all these spots where it's getting stuck and setting off an alarm or a stress response. And because of that stress, we will tend to avoid and shapeshift around the things that trigger us, which might mean that we don't have particular conversations, that we don't take particular meaningful risks in our lives, that we aren't vulnerable, that we aren't authentic, like whatever it is. The freedom that we feel inside of ourselves to conduct energy affects how we show up. So freedom as an Aquarius theme, it's beautiful that, you know, trauma and freedom are these two different things that are housed in the archetype of Aquarius, and how healing trauma is a form of internal freedom. Again, I think the Mars-Pluto, like the whole freeze frame there, there's been so much opportunity. I'll get into this more, I guess, throughout the forecast for some of these spots of deep freeze to be activated, Mars in a way, and unthaw. And I've literally just been experiencing this like at a physical level of feeling like my cage and then feeling it like relax, realizing where I'm stuck and not free, and then having that unthaw. Genuine sight versus ideology is another Aquarius theme. Aquarius relates to systems of thought, and while systems of thinking can reveal deeper patterns and open up doorways of perception, systems of thinking can also collapse perception into strong, stubborn perspectives that become out of touch with reality, or at times really out of touch with the heart. Aquarius can also be truly inventive or be like the fashion movement that's counterculture at first, but then everyone's following the trend and now it's mainstream. Exposure or deepening into systems of thinking may offer different perspectives than mainstream thought or previous conditioning, and it still may not be an adequate explanation of everything so systematically. At an inner level, the inner technologies that I've been speaking to, it would be like becoming continually aware of the stories our mind is making up and having the ability to not be simply run by our mind, or to even transform or recalibrate our thinking patterns. So yeah, you know, when you think about how the mind works and how it turns like a stimuli or an event that happened one time in the past into like a whole, like this is how reality is, and we shape our ego and personality around it. It's like the mind sometimes has some bugs in its programming. And so even though it might be really compelling and logical, or like a system of thought can be really like compelling, it's not always in touch, right, with either reality itself or like in this multiverse where many things are possible. It's like, does it create, like, does it land in your heart in a way? Does it create desirable experiences and outcomes? Or is it just logical and like elegant in its coherence, but like going down some weird path? So yeah, not all systems of thought are equal. And yet they can get very frozen or stubborn. And that's another freedom question too, like breaking out of these rigid paradigms that we collect. So then Mars and Leo, opposite Pluto and Aquarius. Mars in Leo represents a very personal, creative impulse or frustration, bringing in themes of how we wish to be expressed or seen, or the urges that we have for play, fun, and creation. This feels really profound to me, honestly. Like thinking about this, like this landscape of some very powerful Pluto, like program or matrix, Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius, and some like just uprising, like creative frustration of like, I want something else, or like, but what about me? Or, um, but I just want to play, like I want to have fun, I want to have a good time. I mean, that's an innocent, innocent kind of benign way of looking at it. Um, and I'll get more into that. But consider the force of Mars and Leo, this urge for play, opposite Pluto and Aquarius, and we can begin a deeper excavation around the freedom we're able to access around our soul's creative expression. Um, I've presented an idea before in a talk about Leo that even inside of our trauma, for example, we're always, quote, playing. We are playing particular games and roles. So even the trauma bond or toxic romances are the, quote, play of traumatized aspects of self, right? They're just playing a game that they know how to play. It's a weird way of putting it, but it brings up the Leo intelligence that all of life is a stage and we are all the actors. So back to what I was saying about this innocent, like uprising part of self that just wants to have a good time. It's an innocent way of looking at the transit. But I think also Mars, Pluto, when that creative part of self gets, there's some trauma or repression around it, things can start to get really weird or distorted. And I think, one example that's really close to my heart and something that I think a lot about and have talked about before in terms of like beauty and glamour magic, for example, is that um, when when you don't feel good or you don't feel connected to pleasure, like you're having a good time, you might look in the mirror and see the worst reflection and be focused on all your imperfections and having this like horrific dysmorphic experience. Um, and then if you just are having a better time, right? You're connected to some essence within your soul. You feel like you're having fun with people. You feel like you're in the flow of life. And then you look in the mirror and your imperfections don't really matter anymore. You're not like strategizing how to change your face or whatever. Like there's just a glow that you see back in yourself in the mirror. So I do think that maybe the Mars Pluto, this kind of creative essence or this kind of playful, joyful essence, if it's in a state of freeze, if it doesn't feel easily accessible, I think the sense of frustration feels a little bit more extreme, um, because the pressurized state of it. Um, so I noticed that within myself during this transit of where my mind was going or how I was feeling. And if I was able to create like a vibe shift, able to tap into fun, pleasure, enjoyment, that my mental state greatly responded to that. But if you think about it from like a paradigmatic lens with Pluto and Aquarius and just how extreme or radical it can get, it's like when we don't feel a sense of connection to that vital creative energy within, the mind can get weird about it, is all I'm saying. Part of the Aquarian awakening is beginning to source intelligence about what is happening. What game am I playing? It's a level up in consciousness that occurs when we start to track what we are actually thinking and feeling, and not just the stories of what we are thinking and feeling, but say the concrete data points of what happened, not our judgment of what happened. What was the stimuli? What were the body sensations? What thoughts, what story did I make about those body sensations? Like being able to differentiate between those things. And doing this with increasing honesty and perceptive acumen, right? Like Aquarius isn't just like detached in a way of like not caring about things. Like that is really not necessarily the case. Like sometimes Aquarius is radically tuned in and tapped into information streams about what's happening. You know, Aquarius is like antenna like, but also kind of feeling into, yeah, our ability to be detached and removed from whatever is getting in the way of clear reception of what it is that we are picking up on. So, for example, people that have done a lot of inner work to identify how they feel, how they think, can identify what's happening in a relationship conflict beyond just being inside of like blame and story and projection, but actually tracking like more intricately and more objectively the threads that are happening in the dynamic. So this awakening process is really counter to being so merged with our narrative or perception that we, for example, are enacting a self-persecutory narrative towards ourselves, punishing ourselves for our shortcomings, and not even realizing that we're doing that, but simply believing that we're bad. Like we're not removed or detached enough from that process. We're just so in it. Or being so merged with our own victimization that we cannot see our own power or the options we have at our disposal, and we constantly find a villain that we believe fervently is the bad one that's holding us back, etc. The less awareness we have about the game we are playing and the roles we are playing, the less freedom or choices we have inside of the story. The more we disarm our fixed patterns of playing that are connected to more unpleasant or challenging patterns, the more freedom we have to choose a different game that might be more fulfilling and alive for us, or games. So some dynamics that may be currently presenting themselves along these lines are: one is a deeper or pressing desire to feel alive, animated, creative, playful, exposing us to parts of our internal system that are frozen, resistant, cut off, numb. The subsequent journey to de-thaw our frozen aspects and bring them back into vibrant connection with the whole. If that sounds like something that you want, like a simple, if you think about this, Leo is the sun, the sunlight, right? It is the piercing hot light of consciousness. And there's a whole like, you know, psychology, like inner child or child development dynamic of how children are having these big emotions and when they're young require adults around them to stabilize their experience. Adults to help them feel secure and safe by mirroring them of like, I see that you're angry, or like celebrating and being in joy with them when the child is joyful. This creates a sense of stability. So this is like kind of the Aquarius part, like the community or the external shared nervous system network, allowing that child to feel safe in their experience. When that doesn't happen, these experiences that the kid has that's not being validated or connected with just kind of goes off, splits off, and as a trauma pattern or goes into shadow. So where it is that we don't feel really fully connected to ourselves, our own aliveness, where we have parts of ourselves that we feel cut off from, whether that's from some developmental trauma or what have you, that pattern is getting enacted again, probably where it's like off there somewhere. We've separated ourselves from it and we don't want to look at it, or we judge it and we're just kind of like putting it away and putting it aside. So feeling into the way that like heat, solar light, attention, witness can bring those parts back online. I think it would potentially re-irritate the system to be judged or criticized for something that maybe we already feel judged and criticized about. But there's like maybe a more medicinal angle of compassion and actual empathy, even if that's given to ourselves, about empathizing with how humiliated or embarrassed we feel by being seen about something, right? Like instead of trying to hide the thing that we're humiliated about, even just being able to sit in the fire of that type of witness that we find so confronting. So just stating that as like de-thawing is not always as pleasant. And like there is the side of de-thawing that's like hanging out by a fire and it feels cozy and restorative. There's also the de-thawing that's like humiliation or sensation or heart rate going up or something like that. That is where we're touching a chord of connecting back to something that is really alive or potent, but that used to feel like too much sensation, or we built a trauma narrative around like, if people see this side of me, my face flushes up and I'm so embarrassed and it's like not okay to be this way, right? And so when you do come back in contact with that part of yourself, that sensation might be part of that journey. Hope that makes sense the way I'm putting it. We may be confronting where impulses feel taboo or peripheral to us, like we have a part of ourselves that we want to express, but feel we constantly sideline or repress it because of a deep, perhaps unconscious pattern that this aspect of expression is not allowed, right? So repression versus expression, and the tension, the epic battle maybe inside about that, or the gentle healing of that, or the activated healing of that, right? Attention, consciousness, solar light going to something taboo, Pluto. The provocative, animating gaze of consciousness and how transformative being seen is, whether we are receiving that from others in community or deepening our own self-intimacy through the willingness to perceive parts of ourselves that we normally push away. A deeper renegotiation of how we play, not just consciously, but unconsciously. The reveal around where we could be freer within, and consequently where we will find more room to take up space in the stage in life when we've recalibrated our confidence, permission, or self-empathy to places of ourselves that were not as resourced before. So powerful, that process. So as I was talking about with children needing to be mirrored in their feelings to integrate those feelings successfully into their nervous systems, empathy stabilizes their sense of self, and not receiving empathy puts certain emotions into shadow as wrong, right? And so your family system, the culture of a family might have certain emotions that are okay and certain emotions that aren't. And then our personality develops around that. And as we want to become more free and expressed in our lives, it may become really important to liberate what has been repressed. We regain access to shadowed or lost parts of ourselves when we empathize with ourselves in the places that we are the most judgmental or shameful. So, you know, maybe this looks like not rushing to resolution or being a good person, you know, like rushing to perform a certain affect, but having genuine empathy for the anger, the hurt, the hatred, the jealousy, the not good enough feelings, whatever those deep, dark feelings are that we have, and giving them space in our own process, because the constant attempt to kill them off or not have them or not feel them is perpetuating the cycle, right? Like they're not getting to express, and there's like a frozen process that's happening. Just because we might not act out on these things doesn't mean we have to keep ignoring and icing them out either. We may be surprised to find out how much energy and vitality it restores to us to deeply empathize with parts of ourselves that we feel we're not allowed to even exist. So having a therapeutic or like even like a kind of consciousness container for these feelings, I think is really deep and powerful work. Better that than spilling it out in a destructive way out somewhere else. And for those that do successfully constantly not act out on those impulses because of a moral consciousness, understanding that just because you're not acting out on it doesn't mean that you can't extend love to those hurt parts of yourself that are in those feeling states, no matter where you've, shoved them away. And keeping in mind that, like, yeah, it may not always feel like we do need a certain level of resource maybe, or space to be able to go into those processes and to contact these things. So it might be where you are in your life or whatnot. But having the transit of Mars-Pluto, it might be a more activated thing where a trigger or an upset is contacting material that is personally loaded Pluto because of that deeper history. So a transit like this might be highly activating, but in general, like the kind of hygienic process of caring and caring for our inner emotional life is good all times of the year, so that when there's activated times like this, that we, are more prepared. And this might be the time where you're in the dojo working through some of these things. So the creative pressure may be on, and the transformative potentials are big. Just as a note too, part of why I was like insecure about getting on video during the last few weeks was because I was moving through some of my own thawing processes and didn't feel expressive and didn't feel like I had a naturalness. And now I'm practically like on hyper mode, and something like some creative energy is more erratically coming out of me. And I notice internally how like it feels like alive, and there's definitely like inner parts of me that are like, don't show up this way in public, like don't act this unhinged. And it's that kind of like programming that tries to stuff down the expression. So that's for me to renegotiate and figure out, because ideally in the long run I would like to be, have a sustained creative vitality and feel good about expressing and about being myself, and not feeling so censoring of certain parts of my expression. This is what I have for you. Please leave a comment, like this video. I forgot to say that at the beginning. I am guiding a class. I'm going to leave the link in the notes. It's called, and I'm a guest teacher at Nadia Shah's Synchronicity University. It's called Journeying Through the Changes of 2025. It's a 5-week class starting next week. Link to sign up in the notes, but we're going to be going into the Akashic Records to explore the planetary ingresses of 2025, the major ones, and how they're falling in your chart. I wanted to bring in the Akashic Records with this because 2025 is full of so many dynamic changes, and I think having space to really meditate and reflect in like a open, spiritually expansive field like the Akashic Records feels like a great like ritual and way to connect with the changes that are ahead. Also, I'm teaching again the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive in April. The next round is beginning then. So if you want to, get on that early, the link is in the notes. It is by application. So check out the link in the notes to learn more about this course. Um, it will set you up to speak the language of evolutionary astrology, which is a form of astrology that is from Pluto's point of view, resources Pluto and the lunar nodes to gain a portrait of your soul's evolution, like what is happening as a soul who has been here before and will be here again, and looking at your life from that perspective of this life is the perfect vessel for what it is that your soul is learning. And I have found it incredibly powerful to work with soul in this way and to reflect on soul with that level of intentionality and lucidity, and to really play with this philosophy of, not just like why I'm here, but how can I really be creative with what I've been given? Um, how can I reconcile with everything that my life has been and is, and what I want to create from it? Very deep philosophical questions. And this is something I love about astrology, is that it's not just a system of understanding the cosmos, but it's also understanding how that moves through us, like who we are as actors on the stage of this spiritual drama that we are living. So I'm going to wrap it at that and say, just check out the course page. This is a beloved course that has seen some hundreds of students through its doors, and I'm very excited to be offering it again in April. Leave a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I'm going to wrap it here. And thank you for going on this winding transmission about the Mars-Pluto opposition. I probably did not bring any chill. I think that I am feeling the very kinds of activations that I spoke about. So if I wrap it up with maybe some calm down, I would say that during this time with all of this level of activation, it's really helped me to set some intentions before I go to sleep for like real good rest. That actually changed. Like my mind listened, but I asked for relaxation and like getting rejuvenation. I think Mars-Pluto is really amped. Like at the same time that I said I was exhausted, I also was like spiked or like full of energy. And so balancing that and integrating that and feeling like rest and like eating well and getting good sleep was really important. So anything that kind of supports you in grounding or feeling resourced for what is a really highly activating, energized transit that is lasting an unusual amount of time. I'm going to stop it here. Thank you for watching, and let me know how this resonated with you or what you took away from it in the comments.